technical version of the family business where I am fortunate enough to have Eman Namati, CEO of SpectraWave, to visit. We've been talking for a long time. We were waiting for some exciting news, and now we have a great reason to connect. Great to have you on. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we bumped into each other a couple of times. I always enjoyed our conversation. I always thought you would do really well on this type of format, and so high expectations. Good luck with that.
Okay.
So
setting the bar pretty high, sounds.
I know him when I see him. So take the first minute and just give everybody a bit of a snapshot of SpectraWave and where you are at the moment, because there's a lot of ground to cover here about the history and the technology, but I want to give people at least some context of who you are and what this is.
Sure, happy to do that. So SpectraWave is a Boston-based medical device company focused on developing and commercializing a next-generation intravascular imaging product for the management of coronary artery disease. So this is a space that has grown quite significantly, particularly in the US over the last 5 to 10 years. And our belief is that the right product hasn't existed to take advantage of the growth and the opportunity ahead. And so for us, it's all about building the right product at this what we believe is the right time.
Yeah, so without buttering you up too much, just to give everyone out there some context of who this is, I mean, he is a PhD in medical imaging. He is 15 years, maybe 20 within OCT and this type of technology. I mean, I'm sure you wouldn't say it, but I would, this is an expert in this particular area. And so you're the right person, the right time, the right company, and the right technology. And so I'm sure that's an indication of why things are gaining traction. So let's start with the first thing that's on my mind is when you raise a substantial round like you just raised, what I like to do is make sure we trumpet it. So anybody who is going through the slog that you went through for years understands that sometimes it works. Sometimes you're able to get the lead investor, you're able to get the next round. And so could you give a bit of insight of, okay, what was the journey like for the last couple of years to get this next round? And what would you tell somebody who's going through it and saying, look, this is this is our roadmap, and maybe that would help them?
It's amazing to be on the other side of a big financing, or honestly any financing that's critical for a venture-backed startup. It definitely was not easy, for sure. And I think first and foremost, for any entrepreneur out there and any medtech CEO or executive, member of the team, definitely stay focused on what you believe in, for sure. So you're in this company, whatever it is, and you joined for a particular reason. Most of the time, I think, folks that I interact with in the medtech space in particular have chosen to be there versus tech, defense, other areas, in the world because they want to have a positive impact. And so I think staying true to that is really important. I think, for us, it was really important to continue to focus on the core business through this entire period and, maintain a consistent story that we really believed in, which is we're building the right product at the right time, but we're going to go all the way independent of any other entity. And so we weren't doing this kind of quote build to buy situation where we expected someone to come in and magically take over. And I think that's important for a number of different facets in a company like this. But I think when times are difficult, particularly on the financing environment, maybe even more so, that if you really believe that you can stand, you have a unique product for a unique need and you can stand the entire company up on its own feet, given enough capital and time, and taking a relatively straight strategic path, then you have a different level of confidence, I think, as you interact with the different potential financial partners. So yeah, I think that's probably quite important when I think about our process and what this last 12 to 24 months look like. Happy to get into some more
Well,
details, but that's probably the overall philosophy.
yeah, so I was leading to this question, which is what was in the back of my mind when I was reading up on some of the things that you've done lately and the way your round was structured. You're the perfect person to ask this question. Is there a difference between working with a strategic like J&J Innovations
Hmm.
as opposed to, the was there 4 or 5 different venture firms that are participating in your round and in both rounds actually because you had two, and so I'm curious for people who are approaching a J&J or a large strategic or also approaching, like, how did you do both, or was it similar enough that you didn't have to change everything? I'm curious if your approach is how different it is.
I think it's a really good question. I think with every interaction, you are using slightly different language, but still very consistent, at least for us, very consistent on the core, um, I think the core message and the core objectives of the business for the next, in our case, 24 to 48 months. So I don't think you're changing, we weren't over optimizing the investment thesis depending on who we were speaking to. Because I think ultimately that, and I've heard people doing that, and of course, again, in the one-on-one interactions, there's some adjustment that you make, but at some point in the diligence, if you're not consistent across the board, it will come out, and you're now setting. I think one thing that could be a problem is you could be setting different expectations and assumptions across the different potential partners that you want to bring in.
Okay.
So staying, I think, consistent is actually, I would say, quite important.
No, that's compelling because I would think in the beginning it's so much confusion on how you. I mean, I've been a part of multiple pitch competitions, and I can tell you that people, every word is almost painful for them. They want to make sure they use the right semantics and they use the
Yeah.
correct vernacular for each person, and so how much of a difference has it been? And I imagine it's substantial, but I'm curious to what degree is now that you have the 510(k) approval and you're heading towards a commercialization. I mean, that's such a different conversation than, hey, we have this prototype, we're doing some first in humans. I mean, it's such a different thing. How is the how is it received by the VC and J&J when you're like, well, look, we're very close to commercialization. We've already got approval. Does that change the conversation dramatically?
Yeah, I think it does dramatically, plus or minus. So when we first went out to raise financing, and this was earlier last year in 2023, up until that point, we were funded effectively by one venture group. And so, this was really the first time we were going out beyond, beyond that kind of home financial base. And at that time, we did not have either of our FDA clearances, and we were not commercial at the time. Um, but pretty soon, as we went out, we got our first FDA clearance. And then by the end of 2023, we had our second FDA clearance, as well as our first commercial deployment of our product. So now I think what ended up happening through the financing process was, the things that we said we were going to do, we had now started to do,
Yeah.
and start building a track record, almost in a local level with each of the different groups that we had spoken to. And as you know from your experience and being in this space, there's a big difference in effectively having a program which is developing a product versus having a cleared product, which we ended up having, earlier and then later in 2023. And then again, there's a difference in having a commercial product where you're now generating revenue. So we went through effectively 3 transitions of a company, all in the span of 12 months in 2023. And I think those certainly added additional intrigue, excitement, and confidence to potential financial partners.
Yeah, that's well stated. I mean, OCT it's funny. I worked with Light Lab Imaging back in the day. I mean,
Wow,
I'm a
fantastic.
little old school with OCT myself, and I
Yeah,
remember helping build that company many years ago. It was almost 20 years ago, and
right.
and now to see this come to the forefront. One of the things on your site I'd love to, for the folks who are not as well versed in this as you, When you say deep OCT, what are you
Mhm.
referring to, or is that just marketing?
No, I mean, look, it is a play on words for sure, but the fundamental, message that we're trying to evoke with users is that this is a next generation OCT that provides improved image quality, and specifically around the depth, which has been one of the challenges for OCT as compared to intravascular ultrasound in the coronary or cardiology segment. Um, but yeah, it's a little bit of a mix of a play on words on the depth as well as the deep learning tech that we use in the product.
So, in addition to the resolution being exponentially better than IVUS, is it because I was reading up a bit on understanding the tissue penetration for your
Mm-hmm.
technology, and the way that the infrared promotes that, so you can see several millimeters deeper. Is that the main plus? Because stent placement is everything with so much of the coronary artery disease. So I'm curious about that. Is the tissue penetration like the main selling point technologically?
So I think OCT as a whole, so if we just step back, like what was the unique aspect of OCT as compared to IVUS in the earlier days? So when you were working with Light Lab as an example. And I think, at the time it was all about image quality and resolution. So why look at a standard definition TV versus a high definition TV with OCT? But one of the challenges that quickly came about was that although OCT provided higher resolution and thereby reduced actually the learning curve of image interpretation and identified specific features that weren't easily visible with IVUS, the depth of penetration was also a limiting factor because you weren't able to identify a structure called the EEL, the external elastic lamina. And this is a structure that is effectively the native dimension of the vessel. So prior to plaque formation, the EEL and the lumen of a vessel are actually almost coincident. And the EEL is a good marker for sizing for stent placement. So it's a really important anatomical structure that you need to be able to identify. But historically, OCT has had challenges with identifying this structure. And that's a big reason why we believed, for OCT to become the standard of care workhorse device, you needed to improve, the depth and the visibility of this one particular anatomical structure. But when I look at, so that's kind of OCT, but when we look at our product as a whole, there's quite a few, I would say, advantages that we're bringing to market. So, that being one is the core technology being deep OCT. We also have added spectroscopy to the platform and have validated that for identification of lipid, which is an important morphological characteristic in plaques. The device itself, we put a lot of focus on ease of use. So our single-use device does not require any prep, and it's effectively plug and play out of the packet. That's the only high-definition device on the market that has that. It provides the longest pullback in the shortest period. So the scan time is less than 1 second for about 100 millimeter pullback. And then I would say kind of the other element that's really important, and particularly these days, is that image interpretation in any new modality or any modality has a particular burden on the user. And this is a unique setting, I would say, in medical imaging where the operator that is collecting the image data is the same operator that then needs to diagnose the images and perform intervention, all within a very short period of time. Talking about, a minute, 2 minutes tops. So one of the other elements that we're bringing to market is the most comprehensive automated analytics on an OCT or IVUS platform. And so all of our analysis is completed within a few seconds of the scan being completed. So that's actually quite unique for these products.
I mean that's a, that's a substantial enhancement. I hadn't thought of it that way. The workflow is dramatic. I imagine the physicians are in love, with their ability
Yeah,
to
yeah.
work at the pace they want to work at and have the resolution that they need. and all at their fingertips, along with the analytics. I mean, that's extraordinary. So how did it, and I'm imagining you grew up in Australia, correct?
I did.
Yeah. So,
That's
and,
right.
and
That's right.
I don't want to drill down too much in your personal life, but I think your journey is fascinating. So you get your PhD there, and then you come here to some of the rather prominent educational institutions here in the U.S. How does that happen? How do you pick up and say, "All right, everybody, I'm going to MIT"?
Yeah. Um, well, you probably have to go a little bit further back to maybe understand, maybe being able to, someone being able to rationalize this. But yeah, look, I did my PhD through an Australian university. I did the research actually at the University of Iowa, where my professor, who was an Australian pulmonologist, was in a what turned out to be an incredible lab and center for medical imaging, specifically focused on pulmonary medicine. And then, yeah, I jumped over to do my postdoc here at Mass General and Harvard Med, under, two individuals who, are still today I call friends and mentors, and really kind of set me down a path on the optical imaging technology for a number of different applications, initially in the oncology space, and then now in the cardiovascular space. But as far as getting up and, and going, Australia is an incredible country. Just wonderful. I think wonderful culture, wonderful environment, and all my family. My immediate family is actually in Australia, and so my initial um, my initial kind of entry into the US was always going to be temporary. I'll go do a few years of research and then come back to Australia. But as life happens, I met my now wife during my grad school period, and I guess the rest is history at that point.
Yeah.
Then you start planting your roots. So I'm now a dual citizen, Australian and American, and hopefully the two countries never go against each other. But appreciate both, and certainly love being here.
Yeah, it's always amazing to me how it begins, like the initial just push to get you to take that big step to move from Adelaide to Iowa. That's not the
Yeah.
first thing you think of. That's like making a peanut butter and staple sandwich. I mean, it's just not. They don't go together, and yet here you are. Was it a culture shock for you?
Yeah, look, there's some aspects that even compared to Australia, there's a little bit of a difference in culture for sure. But the American, certainly pop culture and movies, etc., music, etc., are well infused in the Australian kind of setting. But the reason I was drawn there and ultimately was very excited about being there was just the incredible research that was being done, and honestly the just the wonderful collaborative nature of the professors and the students in that environment. And I think that actually was quite unique to a Midwest relatively high profile hospital and research center. um, so that was great. But yeah, I don't think culturally it was a too big of a stretch.
Well, anyone who's watched a University of Iowa football game knows that they all turn around to the hospital before the game starts and wave to the kids and wave to all the patients. And
Right,
it's
right.
obvious that it's tied into the fabric of the entire institution. And I don't know if you felt that, but that's the only school, and I watch a ton of college sports. I've never seen any other school do that.
It was a unique environment for sure, and I think this is a town that at the time maybe the population was about 70,000
Hmm.
for Iowa City, and the college made up about 35,000 of those individuals. But when a college football game happened, the stadium filled to 90,000 participants. So um, I would say both were actually quite important to the town. But yeah, look, healthcare was a big part of the country, part of the town.
So one of the sobering parts of what you're working on is 20% adverse events over a 2-year period from stent placement is just staggering. And just so you know, my dad is a patient, or he was. Thankfully, he's still with us and doing fine. But I mean, I had no idea the numbers were that high. Is that global or is that just domestic?
Yeah, look, it's stents have come a long way for sure, and the event rates actually fundamentally for stents have reduced quite significantly from the early days of bare metal stents. But there are still risks associated with stent placement, and there's both a risk associated with the flow limiting lesions that are being covered by the stent, and the follow-on events that can happen because of the stent placement itself. But also, there's a category of plaques that don't actually reduce the blood flow in the coronary arteries and therefore are not causing ischemia. And these are typically not treated. And there's no indication today to treat those plaques. These are referred to either as high risk plaques or vulnerable plaques. And they're the cause of effectively sudden heart attacks. And so, some portion of that 20%, actually 50% of those are from the non-culprit or vulnerable plaques, and 50% are typically from, a targeted lesion or, from the stent itself. So yeah, we still have a ways to go to ensure that we, plan appropriately for the PCI or the stent placement. We confirm that we've optimized the stent placement both geographically, it's in the right location, it's fully expanded. We haven't, the operator hasn't caused any additional dissections in the vessel wall that could have a follow-on adverse event. So all of that's really important, and intravascular imaging has been shown unequivocally to have an incredibly high impact on patients, all the way to hard outcomes, including all-cause mortality, if used appropriately. And then in the future, we believe that intravascular imaging, particularly a product like the SpectraWave product that has both structure and molecular imaging, will be really well positioned to precisely diagnose these vulnerable plaques so they can be prophylactically treated to eliminate follow-on events.
I mean, we all know where the demographics are, and your heart is only kind of built to live so long. And and my folks are in their 80s, and I know they want to live longer, but not just live. They want to live well. My
Yeah,
dad wants to keep playing tennis and playing golf at 83, and his heart is weak, but he still keeps playing. And because of the technology we have today, he's able to keep living a life as opposed to just laying there, which I don't know who wants to get to their 80s and not be able to do anything. I don't see the
right.
point. You have a fair amount of luminaries affiliated with the company. I mean, I've been with the company for 22 years, and Greg Stone's name has been everywhere. And Paul Violet, same way. Bill Little is one of our favorite people. We've known Bill forever, and he's just a good human. And I was thrilled to see that he became part of your board. And I'm curious, how does that help with either attracting talent to bring folks to come on board, or other board members, or investment for that matter? I mean, those people are very well known within the space, and I'm curious about how you leverage
Mhm.
that, and without being obviously obnoxious about it. I'm curious how you handle that part of the equation.
First of all, it's just been incredible to have, honestly, not just luminaries, but just such wonderful people
Yeah.
around the company, and genuinely engaged with the company. Um, that's probably been one of the most enjoyable aspects, in addition to building the team and working with, the folks inside the company, is, to me, the board and the founders are really an extension of our team. And I think, the value that they have brought from the beginning, prior to my joining through to now being in this limited market release on the commercial side, has been truly, I would say, second to none. The value they bring for recruitment and, raising the profile of the company for financing, as well as adding, really high caliber board members, I think it absolutely has helped. And there's a level of credibility and a very long track record in the folks around the table, particularly folks like Greg Stone, where when he is excited about something, and having been an interventionalist himself, and obviously an incredible clinical trialist, um, when he's explaining where he believes the field is going and how a technology like this fits in, I think it really speaks volumes to the potential of the success here.
The importance of the chemistry with your board and with the founders, because I can tell you from doing this for all this time that majority of the reasons when the C-suite projects we work on don't work out is because either they never really built a relationship with the board, or once the honeymoon period ended and they found out what they were really getting was people that were just abrasive, and there was no relationship of any kind. So I would love for you to give some insight on advice to people coming in as a CEO and to the board that's hiring them on how to make it work like yours has, because that sounds like the ideal situation from what you have.
I mean, you have to work at it, right? I think that's the number one piece. It doesn't just happen. Um, I certainly had a lot of support when the board hired me to come in and help. And you know, I had a pretty good understanding that this was going to be a turnaround situation when I joined. Company had only been around, a little bit over a year, but when you're switching out a CEO, things are not necessarily on the right track. So I think for me, expectations and assumptions were set probably just by my own experience were low, but I understood the tech, as you mentioned earlier, but I also knew I could build and bring, rally around and bring a really great group of people together into this company and build a great product. When it came to the board and the founders, I think, look, everyone, particularly as I entered, the the whole group wanted this to be successful, like I think any board wants, in these companies. And so you're definitely starting with a great singular and unified vision of ultimate success. I think things can unravel pretty quickly if expectations are different across board members, founders, etc. And at least my experience is you can't always prevent that, or at least some aspects of those coming up, but you can certainly help in a pretty significant way by communication and ensuring that everyone's voice at a minimum is heard. Doesn't always mean that that's the you're going to go down that path that every individual is recommending. That's hence why you have a board, and of course a management team. But my own style is to over communicate, so I think that's probably been helpful in with regards to speaking to each of the board members and founders on a regular basis, one on one, in addition to having them be involved in different aspects of the business, both in terms of direct engagement with different members of the executive team, as well as helping us on the clinical advisory board, and thinking through how to kind of plan and strategize on commercialization, as we were moving towards that. So I think ultimately communication is important. Make sure everyone's assumptions and expectations are as best aligned as possible, and know that ultimately everyone should want a positive outcome here. And the highest, I would say, kind of the highest objective that would be that you would find across all of the different stakeholders, in my mind, is bringing a product to market that's going to have a positive impact, with the foundation of that being, for that to happen and for that to really be sustained, you need to have a business that can generate profits and ultimately return significant dollars back to the shareholders. So as long as that construct exists, I think you can kind of keep it all together in a very positive way.
Yeah, so we were talking about this a bit before we started, was the expectations now, and you've raised this large round, and obviously that makes people pay attention a little more from the outside to your company. You start gaining more recognition and all of these positive accolades, which is all good stuff until you realize, my goodness, careful what you wish for. And so, the last question I'd ask you is what's next? Now that you have all of this resources and you have some of the right people in place, and you clearly have been in this space forever, so you know the tech as deep as anybody. What's next for SpectraWave, and where's this headed over the next 12 to 24 months?
Look, it's a super exciting time for us.
Yeah.
We are now in our limited market release. The reception to the product has been fantastic. It's a growing market. We are still a small entity though, right? And we're trying to be very careful and systematic about our commercial expansion. I think one of the challenges for any business, but certainly in the medtech space, is maybe going out too fast. And unfortunately, in some cases, as we see in the industry, falling off a cliff. So we're certainly very conscious of the challenges that come with direct commercialization of a medical device. We are, I would say, very focused on commercial, but also continuing to innovate. So we have a new product that will be coming out soon that will increase the opportunity for revenue in the same call point. And that combination, in addition to other products that we plan to bring out, we believe will really drive us and put us in a great place, not just competitively, but ultimately solving a set of problems that the physicians and users have today, that we believe will get us to a place that will put the company in a great trajectory for future profitability. So a lot of work ahead for sure, and but very exciting time.
Yeah. I love amplifying when good things happen to good people. I love that part of what we do, because medical device, it's easy to find the not so good stuff, but to make sure everybody's aware of when magical things happen and when people make them happen and how you could make them happen too. What it is it's a bit contagious. And so that's why I would like to make sure that this gets out here, because I know the road you've taken. I know about 9 Point. I know what you've done. And to get here today is monumental. And I hope you're not too close to it. You can see how much you've accomplished. Knowing you're probably not even thinking about that and just working. But it's substantial. So you're every bit as interesting as I thought you were going to be. Thanks so much for being on The Family Business. This has been Eman, Namati from SpectraWave. Pay attention to this company. They're going to make substantial impact for patients.